Andrew, you can hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear us here in the back? Can you guys hear down there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to read your bio real quick.
Yeah, as everybody's figured out, this is Andrew Clark. His wife is Casey. Casey was going to join us but couldn't this evening. But anyway, this was written in text of Casey also. So I'll start off with Andrew and Casey Clark, relocated to Asheville, North Carolina from the Hilton Head Island area, where they were active members of the Island Writers Network. Now we all know who that is. Although they both have day jobs, they are active writers and social media influencers in several arenas. Both use beta readers and have served as beta readers for other writers. Now, Andrew is a poet published by Main Street Writing in 2019. The poem Jesus in the Trailer often debuted at IWN open mics. This year, his first novel, Where Dark Things Grow, is out. It's described as a blend of horror and folklore and magical realism in gripping 1930 Bildungsroman. Roman. How'd I do with that word?
You're doing it.
I had to look it up.
I did too. My publicist gave it to me and I had to look it up too. I was like, yep.
I had to hear how to pronounce it. Anyway, it has won a Firewood Book Award in a magical realism category and a literary global book award for horror. So with that, please welcome Andrew Clark.
Well, it is so great to be with you guys. As I shared, was a member of Island Writers Network, so know a lot of the Hilton Head writers, and my wife and I miss Hilton Head, but we did return to our hometown up in Asheville, North Carolina, where I'm joining you from right now. So I thought this topic was pretty intriguing, and I was excited. Robin reached out to me about it initially. I have had a lot of beta readers for my work and have been a beta reader for a number of different writers, different genres and so forth, and really find it to be very valuable. I don't think I could have published my work without critique partners and beta readers. So what I want to do, I've got a few slides. I don't like slides because it feels like, something corporate or something like that, but I thought it might guide the conversation. But I want to try to go through these few slides relatively quickly so we have plenty of time just to chat about whatever is on your mind. And everybody can hear me okay, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first question we have to ask is why do you even need beta readers in the first place, right? And I think what they provide for you is a fresh perspective on your work. By the time you reach the stage where you're ready for beta readers, you spend a lot of time with your manuscript. You might be sick of it, and at the very least, you miss things because you know what you mean, right? Beta readers give you a fresh perspective. You get reactions from different types of readers to the work. You get genre-specific feedback. So if I'm writing in horror, I hope to have a few beta readers who like to read horror, right? If you ask me to be a beta reader for your memoir, I might politely decline. It's not that I haven't read a lot of great memoir and love memoir. It's just I'm not well read enough that I feel like I could add value there. The other thing they can tell you is if your characters are believable and authentic. Does anybody in the room there know Mr. Barry Dixon? Is he there?
Yeah, he's here.
So Barry was a beta reader for my novel that came out in September called Where Dark Things Grow. And when he was reading my manuscript, I asked him, in my little sheet I gave him on all my beta readers, I said, does the character's dialogue sound consistent? And I remember one of his notes was early in the book, one of the characters sounded very country, a little bit corn pone, right? A little bit Appalachian. And then he said, progressively through the book, they get more and more sophisticated with their dialogue. And at the end, I thought I was, talking to an Oxford professor, you know. And so what I missed was that consistency of the voice. So the beta reader can help you understand if your characters are believable. Do they believe this character would act this way and do these things, and this character is authentic? It can also help you identify problems and confusing sections. I've had beta readers several times. I wrote an action scene and it seemed really clear to me, and they're like, I don't know what's going on, or I'm confused by this particular thing that happened. So you have some blind spots there because, again, you know what you meant, right? But readers need to be able to understand as well. They can also help you strengthen your story arc to make sure that the major themes that you're hoping come through with your book come through, right? Um, and then also, although we shouldn't write to the market, they can give you a sense of market readiness. So what this means is, again, if I think I've written a romance novel, if I solicit some romance readers, they can tell me like this is not like what I'm used to reading, and they can help you understand like, oh, maybe I'm thinking of this project in the wrong market or genre. Okay, so that's what I mean by market readiness. They can kind of give you a sense of where it might slot in, and it may not be where you think it is. How many beta readers do you need? So my rule of thumb is 4 to 7. And I did kind of do a little bit of searching around to make sure that that's a number that's talked about a lot in the industry. And the reason for that is you get a variety of different opinions. So you need to be specific in what you ask for. When we get through with the presentation, I'll show you the form that I use when I send out to my beta readers, and I'll be happy to email that to Henrik along with the presentation. But you know what you're asking for. So sometimes as writers, we understand where our weaknesses are, like the character believability issue I mentioned before, or we're concerned that the story arc isn't building, or maybe the pacing isn't there. So if I have those concerns as a writer, I need to ask my beta readers to focus on those things, right? It's kind of like if you play golf and you're a great putter. Should you spend all your time practicing your putt? Probably not, right? You should probably be driving if that's a weakness, right? So this is kind of the same thing. You want to ask for feedback in the areas where you know you need help. If you know certain things are really strong, maybe that's not where you want to focus your beta readers, just so they can, sort of pat you on the back, if you will. Okay, so the reason why we limit to 4 to 7 is because if you get too much contradictory feedback, this can be paralyzing, right? If all my beta readers, if I've got 7 beta readers and they're all saying different things, maybe I have a problem with this project. But having more than 4 to 7, what happens is you can get too far afield with too many different opinions. So no book is perfect for everyone. So if you were to look at the Amazon reviews for my book, there are several reviews, 4 or 5 stars, that talk about this fast, brisk pace, and it's a page turner, right? And then I have I believe it's a 1 or 2 star, I can't remember, that says, was so slow it bored me to death, right? Now, which one is true? Which one is true? The answer is they're both true, but it was 2 different readers' reaction, right? So by having too few readers, you can't get a sense for what a broad set of folks would think. You get 2 beta readers, you think you're done. I don't think that's enough. But more than, say, 7, I think then you start to dilute the effectiveness of, again, you can get into too many contradictory threads. You want to give readers clear deadlines, and I'll talk more about deadlines in a moment, so they know kind of what expectations are. You want to consider copies for those who prefer a printed copy. So there are a few websites online that you can upload PDF, and they'll print out a bound copy. And those are kind of nice because I always offer my beta readers, hey, if you make notes in this thing and you prefer doing that as opposed to typing it in Word, just let me know and I'll send you the postage to send it back to me, right? Because that can be really, really valuable to see what they were thinking as they went along. You want to define your goals. Again, going back to what kind of feedback do you need? So here are a few things that you could think about with the feedback. Some focus areas could be the plotting, right? Is it cohesive? Do we understand that the characters are wanting something or desiring something that they're trying to achieve? Or is the pacing right? And an example of pacing that can kind of go awry is a lot of times new writers, when they write an action scene, so whether it's two people fighting or a deer jumping over a log or whatever, they can sometimes want to put a lot of poetic language, and that's the wrong place to put the poetry, right? Or to put your beautiful flowery language. In action, we want subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb, because I want the reader engaged and I want that sense of anticipation. And so pacing is really important, and pacing is different throughout the novel, right? You may have those action scenes where we want to really move the reader through what's happening. In other places, you want to slow down and let the reader breathe and maybe observe the natural world or something, right? But the pacing is really important. Character development, are my characters well developed? Do they sound like an Appalachian person on page 2 and then like a Cornell professor on page 200? That's a problem, right? Language, they can give you feedback around the language you use. The dialogue is really important. One of the things that's you see with newer writers is the dialogue, if you're not careful, can start to sound similar between the characters. And so you want each character to have their own unique voice. And again, because I know what my character Ezra is like in my book, I might miss the fact that his voice is starting to stray, right? But a reader, especially a detail-oriented reader, is going to catch that for me and help me identify those problems. I want to know if the title fits. So I've got a title for this book, and you may have beta readers before you have a title, but if you have a title, it would be nice to know, do you think this fits the genre? Do you think this fits the book? Sometimes I've heard stories of beta readers giving suggestions for titles and the author being like, heck yes, that's way better. So sometimes just asking them what they think about the title can be helpful. Genre fit. This is really important. When you try to get your book published by either trying to get an agent or trying to find a publisher, you need to make sure your book fits in, you know what genre your book fits in. So you may have an opinion as you started the project, but if you have 7 beta readers and 5 of them tell you it fits in a different genre than you think it fits in, guess what? You need to change the genre as you go out to publication. You need to look for publishers that publish in the genre you've actually produced the work in. Comp ideas, so comparable ideas. So comps or comparable titles are books that are like your book, right? What they're helpful for is when you go to query your work to get it published, the agents or publishers will want to know what your comparable titles are, okay? And the reason for that is they want to know where this book is going to sit on the shelf, how it will fit in the market, okay? And so I always ask my readers, like, does it remind you of anything? Does it remind you of any books you've read? Does it remind you of any Netflix series or movies or anything like that? Right. So you can use a movie or a Netflix series as a comparable title because that'll quickly clue your publisher in as to where this book fits. And so your beta readers can help you identify that. Okay. What should your beta reader mix be? So I think you want to first look for readers in your target audience. So if I am writing horror, I would like to have a number of my beta readers be in that reading that genre. They read a lot of those books, ideally. And that's just gonna allow the book should feel like in that genre. Again, going back to the previous slide where ask your readers, do you think this is the right genre fit? Here, if I've got some folks in my target audience, they're gonna like the book, right? If I'm looking for beta readers and I write horror, even though I don't write slasher horror, it's still pretty dark, right? So I don't want to give my book to someone whose idea of reading is more like a Lifetime movie or something more genteel, if you will, right? They're not going to enjoy it, right? So their feedback is going to be a little bit askew, perhaps, right? So I want to try to get some folks that read in that genre. I also want to try to get maybe a few fellow writers involved. They can offer more sort of technical critiques. They can get a little more into craft. I don't think all your writers should, excuse me, all your beta readers should be writers. However, I think diverse perspectives are very strong or are very helpful. And diverse perspectives, we can take a couple of ways here. I could mean that I'm talking about casual readers versus seasoned writers, but it also could mean the audience and demographics of the folks who are reading my book. I would like to see maybe a different range of ages. And if I have chosen, as a white writer to include African American characters or Native American characters or LGBTQ characters, like I really need some readers in that demographic to give me feedback. So for Where Dark Things Grow, there's a number of African American characters. And so I enlisted two women, women of color, two African American women to read the book. And I told them, just, be brutally honest. I have no, and I want to know if I've screwed something up. Just give me that feedback. And that was incredibly helpful. One of them you probably know, very active in the Beaufort community, River Madison, sometimes goes by Susan Madison. She did a phenomenal job in helping me improve the voices of my female characters, particularly the African American characters. Detail-oriented readers, the more detail-oriented, the better, because they're going to pay attention to what's happening and hopefully give you feedback on individual scenes versus just like some comments at the end of the book. You do want some casual readers in your genre, I think, mixed in with, I don't want everybody to be, a writer, MFA graduate or something. I want a mix of readers. That's my personal belief. You do want to, this is a hard one. You want to avoid family and close friends unless they can be honest. Okay. The reason for that is if I take your book and we're really, really close friends and we hang out every weekend and all that stuff, and I get the book and I see some problems with the book, there's the worry that I won't be honest with you. I won't feel like, is this going to make, hanging out with, John awkward from now on if I tell him hey, this isn't working. Hey, this is the wrong genre. Hey, there's a problem. Hey, I don't like your dialogue. You need people that can be honest with you. So my instinct is to avoid family and close friends. Again, unless the close friend is somebody that can tell you the truth. Okay. You want to set clear expectations. I provide a feedback form to my beta readers that spells out what I'm looking for from them. Okay, and I'm going to go over that form with you in a minute. I'm going to email it to the group so you have it. There are lots of them online. If you just go Google beta feedback form, there are hundreds of them online, and they're all basically the same. But I think you want to give them a form, and I want you to think about how you need to customize it for your needs as well, right? Again, if there are blind spots you have, then maybe those are things you want to call out on the feedback form, or things that any concerns you have. Are my characters believable? Whatever those concerns are, spell them out on the form. You want to set a timeline. So a reasonable timeline is 4 to 8 weeks. Okay. If someone is too busy to do that in the 4 to 8 weeks, I suggest you just find someone else to fit your 4 to 7. Okay. The reason is I would like to send out my book, and I would like roughly at the end of 8 weeks to start getting things back from my beta readers. I don't want them staggered over 6 months, right? How can I work on something that if I've got 7 beta readers, I get 2 of them this month, 2 months later, no, I cannot react to that feedback. I need all of it kind of at once to read all the feedback and digest it before I pick up the keyboard or pen to edit anything. I want to ask readers to tell you why something worked or didn't work. There's a typo on this. I should say ask readers to tell you why something worked or didn't work. So think about this. If I read something of yours, a short story or a poem or whatever, and I say, I don't really like this, what can you learn from that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what is more helpful to say is, I didn't think that the plot made sense to me. I didn't think that this character would do what you have them doing. All through the book, you've made me like this character, and now they're just all of a sudden this deplorable human being, right? So you want to know why something worked or didn't work. So, and likewise with things that worked. If you think my dialogue's really great, why? So the more specific the feedback, the better it is. The best beta readers will suggest solutions, not complaints. It is not valuable to you to get a list of things that are wrong with your book with no suggestions. You might as well not have even gotten any feedback. Okay. So when I think as a group of writers, when you agree to take on each other's work, either in a workshop at Island Writers Network or as a critique partner or beta reader, you have taken an obligation to try to provide solutions to make the book better, not just sort of complain about it, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So the next slide, this is where the rubber meets the road. You need to get some thicker skin, okay? Accept all feedback. Remember I said that I have a bunch of 4- and 5-star reviews that talk about how fast the pace is of my book, and it's a page turner and all that, and I have the 1-2-star review that says, you know, bored me to tears, couldn't even get through it kind of thing. All that feedback is legitimate. When we create as artists, we put it out in the world. How the art is received is really not up to us, okay? Now, once the book's been published, it's like, as the saying goes, it's all over but the crying, right? There's nothing to be done once the book is out there. But what you do have the opportunity to do is get feedback at this beta reading stage to polish the book and fix potential problems so that more readers will connect with it when it is published. Don't be defensive, right? I'll give you an example. In my first book, I had a scene where a couple of my characters wind up in a barn dancing with a bunch of bootleggers. You know, it's a classic Appalachian scene. There's fiddle music and they're dancing on the barn floor, you know, and I love that scene. I just love that scene. It was a perfect scene. And then beta readers are like, I don't think this moves the story forward. And I'm still stubborn about it. I'm still like, well, you just don't understand my Appalachian culture, you know, whatever, right? And then I get an editor and they say, what is the purpose of this scene? And I cannot answer besides, I like it. I like it. It didn't belong in the book. Didn't belong in the book. But we can be defensive. Watch against being defensive. These folks who take on the obligation of being a beta reader are doing you a huge favor. Don't be defensive. Take all feedback. It doesn't mean you have to act on all feedback, but take it all, right? And don't be defensive about it. Listen first, analyze later. So sometimes beta readers will be willing to have calls with you to chat through their thoughts. I think that's just fine. I like written thoughts as well, but just try not to have an opinion. You know, if they're sitting there saying, you know, I didn't think the dialogue worked in this section, I didn't think this scene worked, don't really have an opinion. Just say, thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. Same thing if they give you written notes and you read everything, you know, you read it all and you're like, I'm not sure about that. Just accept it. You can get into the analysis later, but take all the feedback you get from all the different beta readers, and then you can follow up with clarifying questions. Hey, Tom, on page 28, you said the scene where, you know, the elephant jumps over the log didn't make sense to you. Can you tell me more about that? Right. I don't, this character feels authentic. Tell me more. Right. And that will help sometimes flesh out what's happening in their thinking and inform you what you should do with that information. Right. So clarifying questions are really, really important. And don't be afraid to ask for that, because again, if I get something on the page that says, I don't relate to this, or I don't understand this. I need to know how to fix it. And so by asking questions, I can get more information. You do want to show gratitude. Again, people are doing you like a huge favor. I try to like some of my beta readers, I sent bottles of wine and stuff like that, like just to thank you. If I have to ask them again one day, hopefully they will remember that. Now, this is the crucial piece. What do you do with the feedback? The first mistake that we can make is to take all suggestions from all the readers. Can anybody, and I guess you guys can hear me and I can hear you. Can anybody think of why this is a problem to take all the feedback from all the readers?
Contradictory.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I think if we take all of it, some of it may be contradictory.
Yes, absolutely. The feedback could be contradictory. One person thinks this scene is working really well, another person thinks the scene is not working, or one person has a suggestion for the scene that's vastly different from another person's suggestion. If I try to take them all, I could dilute my book down to just water it down to nothing. It's kind of like the notion of trying to appeal to all readers. If you tried to appeal to all readers, you probably don't have a very compelling story because you didn't want to offend anybody. You didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. You want to write in a genre everybody would like, and so I go back to my, even in a Lifetime movie, there's conflict, right? We have to have conflict and there's no story. So I can't take all the suggestions from all the readers. So I suggest, again, take all the feedback, read it all, ask clarifying questions, and then analyze what you want to do from there. Another important point is if there's consensus, that means something. Okay, so if I've got 7 beta readers, 5 of them didn't particularly believe this character would take the action I had them take, there's probably an issue there, right? If 1 reader out of 7 thinks there's a problem, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But consensus means something. So going back to my example about the kids dancing in the barn, well, I had several beta readers bring that up. I had consensus, but I still was stubborn about it until an editor told me that I was wrong. Okay. So again, consensus means something. So think about that. Also revise thoughtfully. You cannot implement every suggestion or you will have a mess of a book. So what you want to do is take all of the feedback that you have, look for consensus, look for patterns. If 4 out of 7 readers were confused in this section, I probably need to do something to clarify what's happening. I probably need to tweak that section. And again, I have to discern what to take, what feedback to take, and what feedback to let go. Okay, so consensus is one way to do that, and then also you can take into account the overall feedback quality of your different beta readers. They're not going to be equal in terms of the feedback that you get, right? So again, if I have a casual reader versus a writer, they're going to focus on different things. And again, that's a beauty of having lots of different diverse beta readers. But again, what I have to decide is what's important. What am I going to revise to improve the story? So revise thoughtfully. And this is the issue I was bringing up earlier about trying to get all of your feedback in at one time. If it's staggered, I get, one person's feedback. I look at it like, oh man, that's a brilliant idea. That's great. Then I start messing with the manuscript, right? Then I get some other feedback that contradicts that first feedback. And now I'm kind of up a creek, right? So rather than do that, I'd rather get all the feedback, read it all, analyze it, digest it. Don't get all the feedback and try to start editing tomorrow. No, take it, read it, take your time, go through the whole thing, make notes as to what resonates with you. And then once you've done an adequate look, adequate time, then start revisions. Okay. And then you want to, again, I just said this already, but take the time to process before you start revisions. We probably all heard the writing advice, like when a project's done, stick it in a drawer for a while and then come back to it later. because you will have some fresh eyes at that point. And if you pick it up right now to revise it as soon as you type the end on the first draft, you don't have enough distance. So sometimes it's good to put it away for a while and come back to it a little bit later. I think the same thing with beta reader feedback. I do want to show you, I'm going to open up for questions, but I do want to show you the document I sent to my beta readers. It's probably hard to read on the screen, so I'll just kind of like give you the highlights. But as my readers were reading, I asked them to focus on character development. Were the characters well developed, including secondary characters? Because this is often where we fall down. So we're really good with the main character because we know what their story arc is, right? And we're with them all the time. They're always in our head. But the secondary characters, sometimes we can make them seem, if we're not careful, like caricatures or flat. They can be flat characters. So an example is I have in the book, I have a book coming this fall, the sequel to the first book. And in that book, I have a sheriff that makes a number of appearances. But he's not a primary character, he's a secondary character. And in beta reading feedback, I learned that he was coming across very flat. Like he was a cookie cutter of probably every cop I've seen on every TV show, right? He had no depth at all. And so even though he was a secondary character, I needed to give him a little bit more depth, give him a little bit of a backstory and a little bit of depth. So character development, I asked, do they sound unique? Do you care about them? Are you invested in what happens to them? If readers read your story or your book and they don't care what happens to the character, why would they keep reading, right? It's kind of like that Netflix series you turn on and you watch the first episode and you get done and your spouse or partner is like, hey, you want to watch the next one? You're like, I don't care. That's not good, right? They didn't hook you in the beginning. So another piece of advice I got from some of my writing mentors was, if you are bored writing a section, your readers will absolutely be bored reading that section. Okay? So take that also into consideration. But again, I want to know if my readers cared about the characters, were invested. Did they have the right level of complexity, flaws, humanity, characteristics, things like that? And then I ask about plot. Does the story have sufficient drive? Do you want to keep turning the page? Are there sections that bore you? Remember that slide I had about having thick skin? That can be a real ouch moment when somebody says, I was bored here. Okay. But you need to know. So you want that feedback, even though it's not fun to get. Okay. Are there any plot holes, unresolved issues that bother you? So sometimes the writer, introduces a concept and then doesn't close that concept, or introduces, maybe there's a character introduced early on that we don't ever find out anything else about that character. It's like, it kind of begs the question, do we need that character in the book at all, right? And so you want to know if there are any plot holes or unresolved things that your readers see. Other things I asked them about is the title, as I said, the genre. Does it remind you of anything? So for that comp question, I said, does it remind you of anything? Any books you've read, any movies you've seen, Netflix series? These comparables are useful to you when you go to query your project. And then I give them a deadline. So I want to say, like, if you could get it back to me within 6 weeks, and I wouldn't just say 6 weeks because that's this ambiguous thing. Like, we all think we have this concept of time. We all know what 6 weeks is. Give them a date, okay? A specific date. And then tell them how you want the information back. So you can just put all your notes in a Word document and email it to me. If you want to mark up the copy I printed for you, let me know and I'll pay for the return shipping, because I love the marked up copies. That's just I'm old school. I would rather, if somebody sends me something to read, I'm going to print it and write on it, right? I may type up notes in Word later, but old school, I want to see those notes, okay? And if you print it for them, and just encourage them to mark it up, they may, about chapter 3, that by the time they got to the end, they really didn't bring up to you again in their final notes. So that's really valuable to get that written feedback. So, and then the end, I just really thank them for reading for me, and that their opinion is very valuable, and that's why I asked them to be a reader. Questions?
How do you acknowledge, how do you acknowledge your beta readers in terms of gratitude?
So again, several beta readers for the first book I took them like a bottle of wine or something like that. So it could be, something like that. But also I think when you're having if you have clarifying questions, you kind of have a conversation with them. So you could, have a phone call with them to ask you clarifying questions. And I just, always send a note of some kind to thank them. And then I do think the writing community is, it feels like a really big community, but it's kind of small too. And so, offer like, if I can ever help you in any way, let me know. Right. And again, when you're asked to beta read, I don't think you should feel obligated to always say yes. Again, if someone asked me to read and be a beta reader for their memoir, I would say no. Okay. Because I'm not well read enough to add a lot of value there. Right. And so it's okay to say, like, Andrew Clark, that weirdo from Asheville, like, he asked me to read his horror book and I hate horror. It's okay to say no. That's fine. You should say no if that's not something you enjoy reading. Because nobody, like, one thing I think that's really important is you want to screen your beta readers a little bit too. So by that, I mean, I would like to know if they're comfortable reading horror, where there's going to be some violent things happening. I don't want to send something to someone that's going to upset them, right? And it's not for them. Does that make sense? It's also a good idea, and I meant to put this on the slide. It's not a bad idea to put content warnings on your manuscript for potential beta readers. You can send that out to them when you solicit them. Hey, I'd love for you to be a beta reader for my book. Here's the content warnings. If and my content warnings would say there's violence towards animals, there's violence towards people, and there's a sexual assault scene that's off page, but we know it happens because the characters talk about the aftermath. So if I had a reader who potentially was like a victim of sexual assault, I wouldn't want them to read this book not knowing that was in there. I would like them to be able to opt in or opt out. Does that make sense? Same thing with racism or any other charged topics. I think it's just good to let the reader know before they agree to beta read if they're those contents, if that content exists in the book, so they can opt in or opt out.
So, Andrew, you're also
Yes.
a poet.
Yes.
How do you use beta readers with books of poetry?
So I tend to have like a few folks that are I would call them more critique partners for poetry, where I may send them something, get their feedback, do some revisions, send it back to them again. But when I had a full manuscript of poems, I did have some beta readers read that. And really, what I wanted feedback on there was not so much like line level edits and those kind of things, but like the order of the poems in the book. Where do you think that this order that I'm thinking of, do you feel like that's the right order? And I had a few readers say, like, this poem doesn't seem to fit with the poems around it. So it was more like the order of the poems. And then also I had like a cache of poems. And so what I wanted to do was cull some of the weaker poems. So my beta readers that read the whole manuscript, I asked them, what are the weakest poems? If you had to pick the bottom 5, what are they? And I was able to get consensus on a couple that I cut from the manuscript. So beta reading absolutely exists for poets. It's just a little bit different. Again, you could themes that I think this book about, are they coming through with this selection of poems, things like that. But in general, you're not asking about plot and that kind of thing. So it's more like about, are there any weak poems that don't fit? They're not weak, but maybe they just don't fit. And then are there any suggestions you have about the ordering of the poems, the title of the book, things like that? Yes, sir.
So, something more fundamental, maybe you kind of touched on it at the beginning, but you described the advice around all that, but how do you find a beta reader?
Great question. So one of the ways you find them is by being where you're sitting right now. So in the Island Writers Network or a writing group, you can often find writers who are in the same writing in the same genre or something like that. And then just kind of networking with people at different writing events, writer conferences, different things like that. So it can be challenging to find 4 to 7, but I think that is the magic number. And so I had some people I reached out that didn't have the time to do it, and I'm like, no problem. And so I did have to kind of pivot. But you know, it's also kind of thinking about the network of friends and family that you interact with. If I know that as an example, I have my wife's nephew, which I guess makes him my nephew. He likes to read horror, right? We've never been in a writing group together. We've never done none of that kind of stuff, but I found out kind of like over the years that he likes to read horror. So I sent him the book. So I think it's playing up your network. It can be people even that you used to work with. You know, if you happen to know that they read certain genres, just talking, you know, kind of like just talking about books and talking about what people like to read, things like that. You can build up your reader list that way. And then again, I think writers groups are very helpful. And you know, the other thing is you can say, hey, Barry, I want you to read my book. Do you know anybody else that would like something like this? Right. So sometimes just kind of building the network through asking people, hey, I've got this horror book I finished. I really need some reader feedback. Do you know anybody that might be interested?
I was looking for a silver bullet, but I got that.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hey, Andrew, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Barry. When I told you that your character sounded like an Appalachian person at the beginning and a Cornell professor at the end, wasn't there an agent or something who said the exact opposite?
I think I don't think they said that about that character, but I remember I had an experience with an agent. This may be what you're thinking of, where I sent them the manuscript and they said, you know, I really want some more character development, particularly the secondary characters, right? And but I really love your sense of place and the plot and things like that. So then I said, well, can I revise it and send it back to you? And she said yes. And so I revised it and sent it back to her. And she said, I really don't feel a connection to place. She said exactly the opposite thing she said to begin with, which means that one of our interns read it the first time, a different intern read it the second time. The first one probably got fired or quit or, you know, went on and decided to do something else with their lives. So the feedback was entirely opposite. So yeah, so you'll get that even within your beta readers. They will disagree with each other. That's okay. That's okay. Again, what you're looking for is consensus, and also you will develop a discernment. It's kind of like in critique group. You may find in a critique group, just such as what's sitting around that table there, that certain people, their feedback resonate with you more. They get more of what you're trying to do. It doesn't mean that the feedback from the other folks isn't valuable. It just means that you make more of a connection. So you kind of develop some discernment in the readers, like who kind of gets it, and then who, like, do I really respect their writing, and that kind of, like, there's just things, different elements that come in with what weight I put on things. So I had like 7, 8 beta readers. I didn't do everything that they all said because it would have been a mess of a book. For the process, I kind of learned like who was very detail oriented and who was really invested in making it better, and then who like kind of got what I was trying to do. That makes sense.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
You referred something to a word nation. that one of my beta readers wants a printed copy. What is Word Nation?
I don't think I said Word Nation, but there are a number of online printing companies that will print and bind your book. And so one is called Vistaprint.
What is it?
Vistaprint, VISTA print.com.
Okay.
And what you can do is go there, and they've got several different options. You can bind it in a hardback and don't do that. Just do like a trade. They call it like a trade print. And so it's bound, it's soft cover, but it's bound. It's really nice for the reader to get that. And then it's the way I printed it, it was almost like full-size pages. So there's lots of room for them to write on.
So you do a full-size page on that?
Yeah, I did a full-size page on it.
Thank you.
So they had lots of room to write.
Thank you.
One more question.
If it's short, we're over time. Oh, okay.
What if you went about the whole process backwards? Where you printed your self-published and you gave your book to beta readers, several beta readers, and you got the feedback and were willing to make the changes. How do you feel about that?
I think if you self-published and you have gotten feedback that you think would make the book better, you can just remove it and put it back. Especially with KDP, the Kindle self-publishing. It's Kindle Direct. It's for print and for Kindle. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
Before I self-published, and I did have readers who were authors read it before I self-published.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it kind of just depends on if you think the investment of your time is worth it, or would you rather move on to the next project? That's kind of the way I would probably weigh that decision. If you think it's worth it, the feedback is something that you would, you'd feel more proud to have the book with these revisions. Nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of people who self-published find even just typos or things that the copy editor missed, that unpublish it and republish it. Not a big deal.
Thank you so
Thanks, Andrew.
much.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. Again, I feel like I'm with my people because I attended all those Island Writer Network events with my wife, Casey. And so it's great to see all of you. I will email this presentation and the Word document that you can send out to beta readers to Henrik. And if anybody has any questions, wants to reach out to me individually, please do so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Y'all have a good night.
Okay.